Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, EUKI. Welcome to all of us who join you today here in the room in Berlin, but also online via the WebEx application. And welcome to all our EUKI friends and colleagues who join us this morning via live stream. My name is Verena Ringler, and I have the extraordinary pleasure to guide us through these 2 days of listening and learning and networking. I myself run a think and do tank on the green transition from Austria, and my background is in EU affairs. I have worked in Kosovo for 3 years for a diplomatic team led by the European Council, and I have had the pleasure to travel most of the EUKI countries, including by bicycle or by train. And I discovered, probably like most of you, that responsible leadership and resilience can be found in so many corners. Hence, I'm really looking forward to hearing from you all. Now, first things first. Let me give you some information about the conference #EUKICon 22. This is a hybrid conference, which is a first for the EUKI team. And it means that we welcome about 100 guests here in Berlin on site, but we also welcome more than 100 guests, again, online via WebEx. And we ask the live audience now to wave a big hello into the cameras for our online guests. Hello, online. EUKI from Sofia and Bucharest, from Warsaw and Madrid, we welcome you here from Berlin. We will see you in a moment. More than 200 climate change makers and project leaders in contact and exchange for the 5th anniversary of the European Climate Initiative, EUKI. Wow. So today and tomorrow, we will do our best to hear from you all and include you all on site and online into our proceedings and conversations. And for that, we need to agree on 3 housekeeping rules. Rule number 1, let's be on time. Out of respect for each other, let's be on time at all times. Rule number 2, for those who are online, please mute your microphone, and for those who are on site, please mute your mobile phone. Rule number 3, for those attending online, please turn on your camera, especially while we are in plenary sessions, because we want to see each other, we want to find each other and connect with each other and not hide from each other. Please turn on your video and mute your microphone. So, the 3 rules: let's be on time, mute your mic or your mobile phone, and here we see you all coming up with your videos on. Beautiful online participants. Welcome, EUKI, from all these different corners of Europe where you work on your projects. Please do use the platform Skooks. You can see all the features and the information about the conference there, and you get the most out of your conference experience if you use the platform. If you need help, press the support button, and Philip will be there to help you. Let me now introduce Ulrike Leis. Ulrike, you are the Deputy Director of the EUKI Financing Program. Since 2012, you have been working with the Federal Ministry for the Environment on international climate programs, and before that you led several EU-funded energy projects in Central and Eastern Europe and North Africa. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, dear Verena. And on behalf of the entire EUKI team, I would like to say a very, very warm welcome. It is my pleasure to have you all here for the 4th EUKI conference. Some of you might remember the first 2 conferences were on site in Berlin, in this neighborhood. The 3rd was online. This year we go hybrid. That's exciting. And it's great to see so many familiar and also, of course, new faces in this room and our conference space as well. And welcome also to those of you watching on YouTube. It's challenging times indeed. We just barely overcame the corona crisis. Now we're facing a horrible war raging on European soil. All of this while the climate crisis is becoming ever more prevalent. The EUKI cannot solve this, but we can make a meaningful contribution, and we can be an important building block for climate protection and energy transformation in Europe. In our countries, in our regions, our cities, our communities, and in our companies. There is good news to share. There are efforts and actions that move us forward. And more importantly, we don't have to do this on our own. We are part of a large group of people with a common goal and cross-border networks. We collaborate, we learn from each other, and accelerate each other's ideas and impacts. This is what the EUKI is all about. There is a celebration this year. The EUKI is turning 5 years old. You will hear about our specific impacts of our EUKI climate projects later today and tomorrow. But I'm happy to serve you some numbers. The EUKI has funded nearly 160 projects with more than 300 organizations in 31 European countries. Also, new projects are coming up in a few weeks. There will be 22 new projects and 40 new organizations joining the EUKI community. So far, EUKI projects and the EUKI Academy organized nearly 900 events, workshops, and trainings, reaching more than 35,000 people all over Europe. And our projects and the EUKI Secretariat reach more than 20 million people per month through their press relations and public relations. I think these numbers are quite impressive and deserve an applause. Last but not least, I want to say a very warm thank you to, of course, the BMWK, our ministry, and also all of those contributing today and tomorrow, the esteemed speakers from the European Commission, the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, but also our distinguished experts from the NGOs, from the think tanks and municipalities all over Europe. Thank you for your time and energy, and please keep up your impressive and very necessary work.
Thank you, Ulrike. That's remarkable. 20 million people reached every month. And at the same time, 160 projects that are already in implementation right now and more to join in the coming weeks by more than 300 organizations across Europe. Thank you for this. Now it is my great pleasure to welcome Simon Marr. Simon, you had the Division for European Climate Policy and the EUKI at Germany's Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, the BMWK, which is the abbreviation we will hear many times in these 2 days. Since the beginning of this year, this ministry, under the lead of Dr. Robert Habeck, has taken over responsibility for the EUKI. And you previously worked as a climate policy expert at the Federal Ministry for the Environment, but also at the European Commission and the Federal Chancellery. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Verena. That is correct. Thank you very much, Ulrike. And you're turning the rules around. I actually wanted to thank you, Ulrike, and your GITS team for your hard work. And I would, like you all to applause to the GITS now and to extend that warm welcome to the GITS and the team. Thanks very much, Ulrike. And while we're already at it, you introduced me correctly and you set out the rules straight ahead and you served us with the figures. I actually, it reminded me that I violated already against your rule number 2. I think my mobiles are already switched on. I don't hope that I will violate and become a rule breaker with rule number 1, that is keep it short. And so I'd like to extend the thanks to Silke Karcher, who unfortunately cannot be with us today. As you know, that she had been asked to take over a job she couldn't decline. She's now serving as State Secretary with the Berlin Environment Senator. So Silke, if you are watching us now, because this is also a great, you deserve a great, great merit for all of us that we can meet us now and to build up the EUKI as it stands now. Thank you, Silke Karcher. And it's worth a round of applause. Thanks. Yes. So I'm actually glad to personally stand here in front of you and to see that the EUKI as a baby has been flourished and has been nourished. Because when I was still at Silke's team, I remember that it was quite cumbersome to organize funding, mostly at the end of the year, but there was still a little bit of money available, and to get projects up and running. And I remember someone saying, we could actually need an EUKI in comparison to the EUKI, to the International Climate Initiative. So from this thought actually to put together cumbersome project by project in some countries, this has been established and it's a great success. I'm very, very honored to stand here in front of you. I'm not entirely new to the job. Verena has mentioned it already. I worked in the Ministry for Environment, and I used to be working for Yvonne Slingenberg, who will come online soon. She used to be my boss. So, and also let me introduce some of our members of the team, because it's probably also interesting for you to know who is working behind the scenes. That is Marie Wonneberger, who cannot be with us today. I think maybe she's here. And it's Audrey Mathieu, who's sitting in front of me, Matthias Kasper, and Maximilian von Kleis-Retzer, who is sitting over there. You will meet them all here today in person, I hope. And we have also now the team, the climate team, arrived in the ministry physically 3 weeks ago. That is already quite soon, I've been told, for moving standards. And for outsiders, it may not be entirely easy to understand the role of the BMWK, as Verena has said it. It's the Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. As a new actor also for the EUKI, we basically, in a nutshell, the ministry is responsible for all climate action, be it at the national level, at the EU level, or the international level, except for the UNFCCC negotiations. That is the responsibility of the Foreign Office. It's a very blunt division of tasks that I'm setting out here. My unit is responsible for, in particular, the negotiations and preparing the Fit for 55 negotiations, or the EU climate actions, also substantial dossiers such as the Social Climate Fund, the LULUCF regulation, and the effort sharing, basically all EU climate action you will find us dealing with. And so we were really happy to celebrate a big success at this year's Environment Council, where we were able, in a spirit of great solidarity in the EU, to come up with an extraordinary Fit for 55 package. It's basically, as we say, it's one of the most ambitious climate package that has been negotiated in the EU ever. Why am I saying this? Because this is important also for you to know. We are a political unit, and we dealing with the EUKI, and these two processes can be very, very much linked to each other, and that's what we are trying to do even stronger, to establish this link between our political work and the funding work. And that's, I think, the big strength that I see that this unit can provide. Our unit's responsibility remains, and as I mentioned it, we see that the EUKI can contribute to reaching the goals of the European Green Deal by supporting partners and civil society, in particular in some of the European focus cities. It's now more important than ever. We have heard it already in unprecedented times. We need to stand united in the EU to defend our freedom, values, and at the same time tackle numerous crises at the same time. It's unprecedented times where renewable energies are called freedom energies, and rightly so. And you and we can lay the groundwork with the EUKI to overcoming these numerous challenges in the European spirit of solidarity. And that's what I see is one of the key tasks of the EUKI in these times. However, I'm just the teaser, and more information about this political agenda will be coming soon from our State Secretary, Patrick Reichen. I'm very glad to have him also today present, at least in the video format, by Berthold Göke, our Deputy Director, and by Director of DG Climate, Yvonne Slingberg from the European Commission. I'm very, very great that so many people of you have been traveling to Berlin and to be able to exchange physically today. And I think this is exactly what this is all about, to give you a chance to exchange where do we still have a leeway upwards, what went good, what didn't go so well. We are in a listening mode, and we are really happy to get your feedback, what we can still do better. So I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion and also to meet in person and have fun, and I wish us all a successful conference.
Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you very much, Simon. In listening mode, that's of course something we welcome very much in these 2 days, which brings us to the 2 days agenda of the EUKI Con 22. Let's have a look together. What will we expect? We celebrate EUKI's 5th birthday, and we will take stock of the amazing impact of the EUKI so far, but also we will always see how we can further support and advance EUKI's impact across Europe. We will do this with a number of institutional representatives and project speakers today and tomorrow. And after our sessions today, we here in Berlin have the advantage to raise a glass together, live and in color, as we like to say, but we will make sure we extend our toasts and greetings to all of you who are with us online. And tomorrow is the day where we really focus on the future. We will see how the daily hands-on work of all these EUKI projects has been going and how it can be even further improved. Highlights will be the EUKI Future Labs tomorrow, but also the details for EUKI's next call for ideas, plus upcoming events and training offers. So stay tuned, and if you're active on social media, please tag us on Twitter and on the new LinkedIn account. Always use the hashtag EUKICon22. There's also a social media kit for those who like to use these beautifully prepared templates and visuals. You can find all of this in the WebEx application or in the chat on Skooks. It's time to hand the word over to you all, finally. We invite you as a warm-up to answer 3 questions via the TED.me tool. So I ask the Berlin group to take out your mobile phone, go to the website tedme.com and enter the room code EUKICon22, which you can see on the screen. The online group, you will find the link in the WebEx chat, and also there you type in the room code EUKICon22. Now, you should be able to soon see the first question. The question is a very simple one. In which country are you mostly working? And in which country are you currently working? So you type it in, and at some point we should see a word cloud coming up. We cannot use the tool that we used last year, the Mentimeter, but we use the tedme.com, which is something we all have to practice a bit more, but I'm sure we will soon see the word cloud. Okay, we have a lot of Central and Eastern European countries and the Western Balkans, and a very strong representation here from Germany and in Berlin, of course. Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Slovenia, North Macedonia, Czechia, Germany, Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece, Romania, Latvia, Poland. Okay, if you use the comma, your country will be seen as a new country, but I'm sure we all get the gist. Welcome from all over Europe, mostly the Central and Eastern European and Western Balkan countries today, and from Germany. Now, second question. In 2 words, what does climate transformation mean for you? In 2 words. Please type that in. Now let's put our thinking hats on, but don't overthink it. What does climate transformation mean for you in 2 words? Okay, we have answers coming in. We're waiting a bit longer until everyone has entered their 2 words. What does climate transformation mean for you? And when we hit the 30, let's see the result. Let's see the result. Tech team. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Here we go. We get a big list this time. Working smarter, sustainable future, new ideas, a lot of work. That's too many words. Hard work. Doom. Simon, we will have to speak. Safer future, common care, better life, a social justice, maybe something that somebody wanted to type in here. Systems change, and survival and development. That's good to hear. Let's go to question number 3. Take a guess. Which of these European cities will ban meat advertisements from 2024 onwards? No jokers allowed. Take a guess. Which of these cities? Is it Košice? Is it Haarlem or Linz? Is it in Slovakia, in the Netherlands, or in Austria? Gut reaction. Which of these cities can you imagine will ban meat advertisements from 2024 onwards? Whoa, we have a huge number of responses. And let's see the result. Well, the EUKI community is, of course, a well-informed community, and you know the trends and where the next inspiration comes from in Europe, the Netherlands. It will be Haarlem, and in Haarlem, in the Netherlands, meat advertisements will no longer be allowed from 2024 onwards. Great guess, and there's also a lot of optimists about my own country, Austria, I see. Wonderful. After this warm-up exercise, let us dive right into the heart of the matter, into European climate policies and dynamics, and on EUKI's contribution to the green transition that Simon Marr has been laying out for all of us. And we will now see a brief video message by Patrick Greichen, State Secretary in the Federal Ministry on Economic Affairs and Climate Action. And we kindly ask Patrick Greichen's video message to be displayed now here in Berlin, but also on screen for our online participants.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I would like to welcome you here in Berlin to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the European Climate Initiative. I'm glad that so many members of the European climate community could make it to Berlin or are following us now online. It is also for the first time in history of EUKO that I welcome you in the name of the Minister of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, Dr. Robert Habeck, who sends his warm regards. These are very challenging times, and I'm sure everyone is aware of that. Putin's war against the Ukraine has set off the worst energy crisis in Europe and all over the globe of the past 50 years. We're having serious impacts on global energy markets, and we're all feeling it in our energy bills. So now, in addition to the climate crisis, in addition to the COVID pandemic, in addition to the loss of biodiversity, we now also have to tackle a global energy crisis. It is hard sometimes to stay on track on climate action, to convince people that we need to continue on this path. But I know that everything that is necessary for climate action is also necessary when it comes to diverting from Russian coal, oil and gas. We also have to do some short-term measures that are hard to take, like increasing our LNG import terminals, switching towards oil, which some people fear that we're heading back to the fossil age. We are even putting online some coal power plants we were planning to shut down. But this is a misinterpretation. This is only for the next 18 months to get over the next 2 winters. We know that climate action is more important and will increasingly be more important. We've seen the effects of climate change already this summer with the drought all over Europe, with the fires. We've seen the floods in Pakistan. We know that the crisis is urgent and action is necessary. So we will speed up the transition to renewables. We will speed up energy efficiency, and we will speed up electrification to become independent of fossil fuels even faster than we thought. Because that will not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, it will also increase our security and make us less dependent of autocrats. You all play an important part in this process. We need ambitious climate policy, not only in the governments and in big multinational companies, but we also need you, the civil societies, the municipalities, the climate pioneers that are all over in civil society. You are closest to the everyday life of citizen, and you know what needs to be done to make your country climate neutral. With the European Climate Initiative, we want to give you the means to put your ideas into practice. Today and tomorrow, we want to encourage you to learn from one another and to exchange your ideas with the EUKI Secretariat, with the government representatives, with academia. I wish you fruitful discussions. I wish you a great stay in Berlin, and let's keep going.
Thank you to the State Secretary for this strong message of commitment and full perseverance. And I now ask Berthold Göke here on stage. Berthold, you are the Deputy Director General for National and European Climate Policy in the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. And before, you were Deputy Director General for Climate Policy at the Federal Ministry for the Environment. So you also started out there and have a big track record on climate policy. You have worked, among other stints, at Germany's representation to the OECD in Paris and as head of division for environment and sustainable development in the Federal Chancellery. Welcome very much. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today, Berthold Göke. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Dear Mrs. Lingenberg, dear Mrs. Ringler, Mrs. Leis, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. A warm welcome, really, also from my side. I'm glad we were able to hear these opening remarks from our State Secretary, Patrick Reichen, who unfortunately cannot be here in person today. I would like to offer some more thoughts on the topic of this year's EUKI Conference, fostering the green transition, facing crisis, and staying on track. Before I hand over to our guests from the European Commission. First of all, a few personal remarks. I'm very happy to be back at the EUKI Conference. I was in fact responsible for the EUKI in the starting phase, and in February 2018, in the first EUKI Conference, I think it was in the representation of the GITS, I had the honor to make the inaugural speech, or the starting, or the opening speech, and I had the possibility to present the German Climate Action Plan, which was the basis for our work and our concrete work in the following years afterwards. In the meantime, I was just responsible for national and international policy, more EUKI than EUKI, but now when I moved to the Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, it is the national and the European perspective that I may put together with Simon and all the colleagues from the division, and also to work with the EUKI project. So for me it is really impressive being back here and being able to see that how much EUKI has grown in recent years, and we are currently launching the projects of the sixth call and preparing the next one. The number of organizations, projects, and most importantly, people that are part of the EUKI, we have heard this already this morning, has grown, and it is really impressive as far as events and publications are concerned as well. So that is, I think, something where we all can be quite proud about. Well, despite the current circumstances where Russia is waging a cruel war against the Ukraine, we have decided to nevertheless celebrate EUKI and to celebrate you and your work over Europe. After more than 2 years of an international pandemic crisis, we felt that it is about time also to create a place to come together again and exchange virtually, but more importantly also physically. The war in the Ukraine, dear colleagues, has fundamentally shaken the agenda of policy makers and administration in Europe. We can feel this every day. Simon in the Ministry for Economics and Climate Action. The energy crisis, the skyrocketing prices pose a greater risk to our societies and threaten their weakest members most. In these times, where manufacturers are worried to have enough energy supply to sustain their production lines over the winter without going bankrupt, and households facing skyrocketing energy costs, as Patrick Reichen has just emphasized, it is important, dear colleagues, to keep also focused on tackling the even greater climate crisis that is looming. I know that we are preaching to the already converted in this room when I tell you that we need to tackle climate change now more than ever. Our window to act, dear colleagues, so as to avoid irreversible climate damage is closing. There is no doubt between us. However, the challenge in these times is to reconcile these two efforts. Admittedly, not an easy task. This task requires, as a temporary emergency measure to ensure security of energy supply for the next 2 winters, as Patrick Reichen has just said, unfortunately also relying on fossil fuel imports from third countries. At the same time, however, we need to speed up our efforts to become independent from fossil fuels. So it is now a question of more climate protection efforts, deploying renewable energy with scale and speed, and increasing energy efficiency wherever we can. And in this effort, we must not lose sight of those low-income economies and households who struggle with the upfront investment in a green transition. It is also evident, ladies and gentlemen, that this green transition comes with a number of co-benefits that will help us to get through the climate crisis. Let me briefly outline what we need to do to tackle the climate crisis and what defines our daily work. I have already talked about the need to move away from fossil fuels. Energy efficiency and renewables make us independent of unreliable supplies of coal, oil and gas, and will hopefully help to protect us from blackmailing us in the future. Renewables will also lead to lower prices for energy in the long run, something everyone will benefit from. The Repower EU package, dear colleagues, which the Commission has just proposed and is currently being discussed among member states, is a very important tool to foster this energy transition. In addition, we are currently working with our partners in the European Union to adopt the so-called Fit for 5 package by the end of this year. As Simon has already pointed out, the Council has reached one of its most ambitious climate packages at the Environmental Council this June, and we hope to finalize the trialogue negotiations between the European Commission, the Member States and the Parliament by the end of this year. And that is the most important thing, to keep up the same level of ambition as the general agreement of the Council. One key aspect, dear colleagues, of the Fit for 5 package is a new emissions trading system for the transport and building sector, called the ETS2, as you most probably know. Carbon pricing is nothing particularly fancy, I admit, when prices are already high, but we believe that this is the crucial part of the package, to reward climate-friendly behavior by putting a price on CO2 emissions. That is the positive way to tell this story. Reward climate-friendly behavior by putting a price on CO2 emissions. At the same time, dear colleagues, member states agreed in the Fit for 55 package on a social climate fund, which ensures that additional costs are caused by the ETS2 are compensated through revenues from the auctioning allowances. That way, solidarity is ensured and poorer groups will not be left behind. Leave no one behind. Sustainable agenda. At the national level, Germany has set itself ambitious targets. We are staying on course with our legislative packages to increase speed and scale of the deployment of renewables. We are not only maintaining a clear course, but are also significantly strengthening our policies and measures with an upcoming climate action program. We will also become greenhouse gas neutral by 2045. 45, yes, that's the year. And coal-fired power generation ideally by 2030, and achieve a renewable share of at least 80% of gross electricity consumption. At the same time, it is important to protect citizens from excessive price increases in order to prevent energy poverty. That is also an aspect of acceptance in the public, between the people. We have implemented a number of relief packages to help consumers shoulder the increased energy costs and help preserve employment. So after this very brief walk through the political and priorities in the EU and national climate policy, the overall course we are heading should be clear. And also the EUKI and its programs will need to turn its course towards this direction. Ladies and gentlemen, let me get back to you, the EUKI community. Because as much as we need politics to develop the framework for climate policy, we need the people on the ground bringing change to their municipalities, schools and communities. The EUKI community is made up of people who do just that. I want to thank you for your work and commitment, for your hope that you can collect some, and I hope that you can collect some inspirations from one another and from the speakers here at the conference today and tomorrow. It's great to have you here. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bertolt. You mentioned it again, the Fit for 55 package and the Repower EU program. Those are two really important reference programs by the European Union for the EUKI community in the future. And we will hear more about these two programs by Yvonne Slingenberg, who has been already welcome a couple of times now. Let's make sure you're already following us online, Yvonne. It is great to have you in our conference to share your insights with us on the European political framework. Good morning to Brussels. Yvonne, you direct two departments or strands at the Director General on Climate Action at the European Commission in Brussels. One group of experts works on strategy, analysis and planning, and the other on innovation for a low-carbon, resilient economy. And for many years, you have been dedicating your work to European climate strategy, governance and emissions. And we are really, really delighted to have you back here at the EUKI Conference. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Verena. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Because indeed, I have not been able to travel to Berlin to be with you physically, which would certainly also be very, very nice, but I'll have to do with, just being with you this morning online, which is, of course, an advantage, that we've gotten used to that, all of us. Afterwards. So this is, daunting and maybe depressing, and recurring every year, I have to say. Let's think of COP26 in Glasgow. We had an ambitious outcome there. We had countries and companies making important commitments, for example, to phase out the use of coal. But of course, since then, and it's already been mentioned, we have seen, Russia starting its unjustified war of aggression against Ukraine. We have seen, as a result, we see energy prices skyrocketing, and we see security of supply concerns affecting people, all of us, and companies as well. And this, of course, also has, wider ramifications with the impacts on food prices and steep inflation. This is currently quite a tough situation we're having in Europe, but we have to keep in mind that, it is even more tough globally. We will be, for sure, reminded of that by our partners at COP27 when we discuss, the needs for adaptation, loss and damage, etc. But let's, zoom in on Europe a bit more. 2022 is clearly a difficult year. We have these high energy costs, we have high food prices, and this is affecting everyone. But indeed, the climate crisis and kind of, if you want to call it like that, looming ecocide will not go away. Not because we have other, more pressing short-term issues to deal with. So despite all these difficulties, we should not change course or water down our commitments. Of course, we have to recognize, and I think also Patrick Reichen mentioned it, with the coal mines staying open and the power plants staying open, for immediate security of supply, fossil fuel alternatives are necessary for now. And that is alternatives to Russian gas, oil and coal. But at the same time, we need to accelerate the green transition. We are very pleased that within the EU, we have been able to, stay this course ever since the war started, and the discussions on the measures that will be necessary have started since March. So clearly, renewable energy and energy efficiency are recognized for what they are, which means not only cheaper, but also creating sustainable jobs, and the many advantages in terms of self-sufficiency, or let's say less dependency that they bring as well. We need to work harder on adaptation as well. I want to mention that as well. I mean, we need to become more resilient in Europe, and governments need to protect their citizens as much as possible from all these very serious consequences of climate change that we see time and again. It's of course also underlined, very, very regularly by the global science community. And we need to, keep in mind that if we are not sufficiently, how shall I say, successful on cutting our greenhouse gas emissions, at the same time, whatever we do in terms of adaptation will never be enough. Now, to some extent, fortunately, I am optimistic because even through the pandemic, the EU did not lose sight of the need to work on the green transition. We are, and this has been mentioned as well, we are making steady progress towards the adoption of our Fit for 55 package. In fact, although the COP is already in the middle of November, we hope to make substantial progress in the negotiations between the European Parliament, the Council, so the Member States before the COP, so that we can really go there and say that we are very serious about implementing our ambitious targets. Now, clearly, currently the situation in the EU is quite serious, and we also have to acknowledge that it will remain difficult for some time to come. So that is all the more a reason why we need to be and have solidarity with each other. I mean, we can all imagine that, for Putin, it would be a dream if he could play the EU member states and the EU citizens out against each other. So we have been very, hard working on working towards ending the dependency on the Russian fossil fuels. We are working on diversifying, getting gas from other suppliers. We have been together, working a lot on filling the storage sites, which fortunately has, already led to some results where we're over 80% of storage filled already ahead of the target dates. And very importantly, also, we are saving gas because we all know, I mean, if you save energy, that is clearly, the cheapest and the greenest way of any action you can take. Member states are working towards a 15% reduction in gas consumption this winter. And we have, that was only last week, also proposed as the European Commission to reduce electricity consumption, notably during peak hours. But clearly the point is that the whole society needs to be involved and everyone can contribute to facing this challenge. And I know that this is what is happening in Germany too. So clearly the only lasting solution is the green energy transition. I already said, they're cheaper than fossil fuels, but they also make us more sovereign when it comes to our energy choices. Now, back to specifically, more climate and Fit for 55. It's really good news. We have been working on this for 1 year already since the Commission put forward the proposals. It was 13 proposals, discussion between the Council and the European Parliament. But the good news is that we have, and indeed it has been referred to, the very successful agreement in June in the Environment Council. And there was a position in the European Parliament as well. And for us, the good news is that we have a high level of agreement between the two institutions. And this is notably the case for the ambition level in the EU emissions trading system, in the effort sharing regulation, which sets the targets for member states at national level, and also in the land use change and forestry proposal, which is all about, how we enhance the absorption of carbon and reduce emissions in land and soils and forests. So from that, let's say high level agreement on ambition, it is clear that we will reach the at least minus 55% that we have all agreed to for 2030. Of course, still many elements to be negotiated between the co-legislators, and it has been referred to this new emissions trading system for buildings and road transport is still a fairly challenging one, in the sense that there are quite diverging ideas on where to go there. Also, the technicalities are quite complex. The combination with the Social Climate Fund is, of course, absolutely essential to address the impacts on vulnerable households, but also small enterprises and transport users. But yeah, we hope that we will have, a package of EU climate measures for 2030 again in place soon, and that means ready to implement. Again, why did I say I'm optimistic? For me, this is very good news, because it really, again, confirms that the EU will stay the course, despite the short-term emergency measures. And, secondly, and not less important, it means we can start working on implementation. Well, I do hope that, nobody has been taking a wait and see attitude, because clearly we already had last year an agreement on the European climate law, where we all agreed to have EU-wide binding targets for climate neutrality by 2050, not 2045 like in Germany, but 2050 for the whole of Europe, which is, a very, very ambitious goal. And also to reduce EU-wide emissions by this at least 55% by 2030. So with this, it was already clear that the way in which, we live and work needs to change if we want to keep this promise that we embedded in the Paris Agreement, to do everything we can to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, clearly, I think today, at least between the converted, as I think Bertolt was also saying, it's clear that the transition is inevitable and it needs to happen fast. Clearly, even faster now, considering, the geopolitical situation and the decision to decrease our dependency on Russian gas and other fossil fuels. Now, just to keep in mind in all your conversations, and I'm sure you do, but inaction is not an option, because failure to meet our climate targets really, really drastically increases social costs. The environmental damages from more extreme events, again, flood, heat waves, droughts, forest fires, but also, very importantly, I think it was touched upon again as well by I forget whether it was Patrick or Bertolt, but the distributional impacts. Because clearly these costs will be felt, the hardest among those households which are already vulnerable. And this can be financially vulnerable, but it can also be, otherwise vulnerable. And they also have the least capacity to adapt. This is about, escaping pollution. It can be, insuring your property, your home, or to boost flood protection, whatever. On all these fronts, there tend to be households that are more vulnerable. Now, as my political boss, Executive Vice President Timmermans, regularly underlines, if we cannot convince our citizens that this green transition is just, so fair, there is just not going to be a transition. So I'm convinced, like probably all of us in this conference, that, only by working with all stakeholders and partners, we can deliver this green and just transition on the ground. Now, to get there, Europe needs to invest in technologies, in new business models, in skills, in infrastructure, and also importantly, in changes in behavior. We have programs at EU level, programs and funds to support member states and different actors. And here again, the Recovery and Resilience Fund comes to mind. Of course, the more traditional cohesion funds. We also have newer kids on the block, such as the Just Transition Fund or the Innovation Fund. Now, we also work with citizens and stakeholders through participatory initiatives. And here I'm thinking of the Climate Pact, which Commission President von der Leyen asked us to set up, and also the Just Transition Platform. And all this is meant to allow for exchanges, mutual learning, and networking, of local, regional, and social partners. But clearly, national programs like the EUKI, EU Climate Initiative, are another essential building block. And this is all about, bringing companies and citizens on board, showcasing best practices, learning from each other, and to basically, build this just transition for all. So this conference and the European Climate Initiative program itself are, again, very, very necessary and they help make sure that all stakeholders can contribute to the shaping of how we form this energy and climate transition. And again, only in this way we can ensure that each and every one of us accepts also that we are in this transition and that we have to make changes, and at the same time contribute their share in delivering on the Paris Agreement goal for us and basically for future generations. So I basically want to commend the German government for these efforts and all of you for your contributions. And I would like to wish you all the best in these days, discussing what can be done, what are the best courses of actions, what are the best examples, and to take this forward because it's needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yvonne. Thank you for taking the time in your very, very busy schedule in Brussels to be with us today to greet the EUKI community and lay out the political framework in Europe for all of us. Now, after this opening, let's take a moment for a short break. Coming back, welcome. Please enter the room if you're here in Berlin right now, and enter the online room and again put your video on so we can all see you online. We have heard there's a lot of people who have joined us online. Good morning again to those who came a bit late. I hope you all had a good coffee break. I hope you had good and fruitful exchanges with others from the EUKI community. And we now want to give the floor to experts and members of the EUKI projects and the EUKI community. We will reflect on the insights that we have heard from Bertolt and Yvonne, Patrick, Simon, Ulrike. But we will also turn to you as a project community and ask which challenges and opportunities, in light of everything that we have heard now, does the EUKI community of practitioners face in Europe today? Which challenges and opportunities, and how can we harness all your local and regional contributions now in these very difficult times? To kick this off, I want to welcome Anilia Stefanova, Nils Meyer-Ollendorf, and Stepan Visi, who join us in person here in Berlin. Anilia, you are based in Sofia, Bulgaria, where you lead the energy transformation work at Bankwatch Central and Eastern Europe, or Bankwatch CEE. You joined this non-governmental organization more than 20 years ago, and Bankwatch today is the largest network of grassroots environmental and human rights groups in CEE. You monitor public finance institutions like the European Investment Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which of course are responsible for billions of investments in these areas. And you investigate the impacts of public finance when it comes to the environment. Welcome, Anilia. Niels Meyer-Ollendorf, you are a senior fellow and head of the International and European Governance Program at Ecologic Institute here in Berlin. Ecologic is an independent academic think tank for environmental research and policy analysis, and it was founded in 1995 and is widely known and appreciated for its work in strengthening the European and international dimensions in research, education, and the environmental policy discourse. You have a background, Niels, in international and European law, and you focus on climate protection, EU policies, democracy, and governance. Welcome. Stepan Visi, you are a climate policy expert and project coordinator at the Center for Transport and Energy, or CDE, in Prague, in Czechia. This non-profit and non-governmental organization focuses on the environmental and climate impact of transportation and energy production. Currently, you work mainly on the Fit for 55 package and its implementation, and on the Czech EU presidency. You're also the co-author of the Czech and German climate podcast, Carbon, and I think you speak German, and you do this in German. Welcome here, Stepan. Niels, let's start with you. From a bird's eye view, where does the EUKI community stand in Europe today? Looking at our immediate future, what challenges and opportunities does the climate action and energy transition community face?
Thank you, Verena. Well, quite a question. Where EUKI stands? Well, we stand in Europe. And I think that is, part of the story, that we are just like really very much ingrained in the EU policy cycles and policy making. So that's how I see it. And I think it's true for most of us that we work on policy process in one way or the other. Some colleagues have, different projects that are not so much closely aligned to, related to specific policies, but a lot of us actually do. So I understand your question more, where are we now? Lots of colleagues have already talked about the war, about how the US responded, the Fit for 55 package, we got some points. And I think what Yvonne said, I think is a very important observation, and that is, despite all the differences that we have in these 27 countries, there is really quite a sense of unity, I would say. If I look at how we actually have dealt with the war, so far I was actually quite impressed, maybe with the exception of one country, but all in all I think the sense of unity in Europe is quite impressive. I think it's something that we really should treasure and not taking for granted. It's nothing that happens by accident. It really requires a lot of work and a lot of understanding among each other, and that's why I also see EUKI, I think. That we actually managed to have a pretty good exchange among different groups, and this exchange really bears fruits. So that's, I would say, a very important point. So this is number one. There is a sense of unity, and that sense of unity is nothing it's not a matter of course, by no means. So if I look at that, look at the next step, I would also say there were some new lines of distrust in a way. We have spoken about this quite a bit, and that what I mean is actually what have colleagues from Poland and other European countries, Eastern European countries, have told Germany, for example, when it came to the relation to Russia. And I think we, as someone from Germany, have not been really up to speed when it came to that point. Germany was wrong. Very obviously, and lots of colleagues in Eastern Europe were very right. So I think that is something we really need to address, because what I see is that this big mistake, not only the part of Germany, also other European countries, actually fires back on the Energiewende and the energy transition, because there are some parts, in particular in Eastern Europe, that see Germany's mistake as like a symbol or indication of other things that Germany does and other European countries also go wrong. And that is actually something that goes for the Energiewende. That is, if a country makes such a big mistake as towards Russia, it is also bound to be wrong on the Energiewende. I think that's wrong. It's not correct. But I think it's a fair observation that this kind of distrust, it has emerged. It's not only among the usual suspects in Poland and other countries, but it's just something that's very broad in societies. I mean, I guess colleagues, can explain this better, but that's what I actually hear from colleagues. And I've asked my EUKI colleagues and partners, what should I say here? And that was one thing they told me. Please say there is an issue of this kind of distrust despite all the unity. My last point is big picture, Fit for 55. I read, for example, von der Leyen's State of the Union. I think there were some important elements there, but Fit for 55 was not mentioned once in that speech. I think it's not a strong indication because Yvonne, I think, was very right, how it actually works. But yet, I was a bit surprised that in that speech, climate was only featuring as an issue of drought, in the sense of energy security. I found that quite an important observation. Next to all the technical issues that many of us deal with when we come Fit to 55, we know this, those of you who are actually involved in these processes, it comes down to very technical issues, and all of these are very important. And I think on the one level, we have a lot of agreement on the targets, and that's where we actually go to, but when it comes to specific issues, like, for example, I give you an example, effort sharing, there are lots of different issues of, do we actually include more flexibilities? Do we actually undermine the ambition level with all these technicalities? And that is, I think, the tension that we face all the time. And on the high level, yes, we are fine. When it comes to the technical level, there's a lot of tension. And I think that is something very normal, usual, and I think we can overcome that, but not at the expense of weakening climate ambition.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Niels. Before we come back to this, let's hear Anelia. At Bankwatch, you aim to accelerate and intensify energy transformation right now in 8 Central and Eastern European countries. And how, seen from the ground, can this happen as a just transition? As Bertolt and others have mentioned before, how can you balance the transition necessities with social needs on the ground?
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's dark, probably this is why I'm confused. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I should say that I'm a big fan or big supporter of the EUKI program, not only because my organization, Bankwatch Network, is one of the first beneficiaries of the program, but also because I see how much indeed it created the community in the last 5 years and how much it was needed. I see this was something which was really a visionary for sea region. Bankwatch is one of the, it's mainly focusing on the Central and East Europe, and EUKI spotted the right gap. We were lacking funding for civil society, for progressive actors, to be accelerating energy transition, to be speaking and showing the voices where most of our region, when most of our region was seen as the climate skeptics and the one which are troublemakers normally into the climate discussions. And I think with your support, we're in a different point today, because definitely we would not be so resilient or so much prompt to addressing the crisis if you was not be investing in capacity and development of civil society and progressive actors in the region as EUKI did. Previous speakers spoke a lot about the crisis and the different impacts. Indeed, we are living in a very difficult and challenging time. But also the crisis is an opportunity. It's no secret that indeed, also in the other languages, crisis is considered, unlike Chinese, that crisis is considered an opportunity point, turning point. So I want to look at this perspective, that how indeed we are now embracing and rethinking some of the concepts which were more and more visible today, and how it's bringing to the new stage of the transition, of the energy transition. It was spoken a lot today about the solidarity, and it was indeed one of the biggest achievements we had in the last year. Seeing already before the Ukraine war, the fact that during the COVID time, we had the biggest effort of the Europe to come together to put funding and measures to come out, to cope with the COVID crisis. And we had the biggest funding source, like 2 trillion euro, which was put together in the new generation which are mainly going for the Central and East Europe and for the Mediterranean countries. In so many of these countries, this funding is really a big amount of the public spending. In our region, probably around 50 to 60% of public investments are driven by the European funds nowadays. So this solidarity was shown even more during the crisis, and I think also in our region we've seen the changes in the mentality and the need for keeping Europe stronger, acting together as never before, and accelerating the transition. But this solidarity has also a new dimension, because we have now more and more concerns about the winter and the energy prices. And even though we have forthcoming measures at the European level, like European Climate Social Fund, unfortunately they would not be enough to come and address and will come a bit later than what the needs are. So solidarity and inclusion is something which we need to discuss more. And we see it clearly also when we work in the just transition regions, the regions which are phasing out coal, that we need new type of dialogue, discussion about what are the right measures, the one which will be not locking us in the long term, and the one into the fossil fuels, and the one which will be helping to redistribute, to help to support the people which will be more suffering from the energy crisis, and will be gaining, that they gain also confidence that energy transition is something which they would need to endorse. We spoke today also about saving energy. I'm really glad to see that it became a predominant issue. And it was said in the previous speech that saved energy is the cheapest one. And we see also new dimensions of the saving energy coming across Europe. I came back from Baltic states last week, where the Lithuanian government announced 20% cut in the energy use for 2 years. It's something which we will never expect before. And we need more of the discussion about what saving means, and how saving could be accelerated. But we should be saving energy, but not effort. I mean, it was said also before, we need to be working probably 2 times more and more efficiently, because there is still too much money which are not used properly for accelerating energy efficiency in the houses and efficiency in the sector, in the transport sector. So we need more capacity in the local and regional authorities to be working on and planning better. We need less bureaucracy. We need more support for citizens to develop their own initiatives and projects. And last thing, which was mentioned in the previous talk, was security. Security, which is also, we are rethinking more and more in nowadays context, because what was secure before, I mean, like a big nuclear power plant or a big oil shale power plant next to the Russian border, today is not any longer energy security for us. And how the President von der Leyen was saying, we need to be looking at the homegrown energy. And this means that we need to think about what security is in today's context, about decentralization of the energy system, of bringing energy communities be a crucial role of the energy supply, and consuming and producing energy closer to the houses, and accelerating the uptake of renewable energy at local and regional level. In this way, supporting also municipalities and communities to be taking part of the energy transition. So I'll stop here. These are the 3 things which I reflected based on the previous discussion, and happy to engage with you in the further talks.
Thank you very much, Anilia. So a lot of progress, but also steep challenges ahead still. Stepan, we just heard it. There's also a whole sort of field of building communities in terms of transport and mobility and energy. This is exactly what you do at your center in Prague. You try to build a community for energy-friendly mobility, and you say energy transition cannot and must not sort of crowd out energy security, but actually or the other way around, you say energy transition equals energy security. Is this something that you can use and see also working when you are in your daily practice in Czechia?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here as well. What I would say to that, I think I wouldn't necessarily say that energy security equals energy transition, but I think that you cannot have energy security without energy transition. I think we all probably agree on that here. And just for the context, we are working with partners also in Central and Eastern Europe on this and on Fit for 55 and the Green Deal. And I think in this new situation of the war, or the new reality of the war and the energy price crisis, we are all struggling in our projects to come up with answers to those questions. How do we deal with this new situation, and how do we connect our project, and how do we respond to this and keep it relevant, you know? And for us, one of the answers was the debate on energy security, because this is something that we maybe weren't expecting to be involved in still a year ago or months ago, but now it seems it's a very dominant topic, and I think it has become clear that the understanding of energy security as it used to be, which used to be, from my perspective at least, mostly about securing enough supplies of fossil fuels, it's outdated and it's not relevant. So I think we need to change the way we think and we talk about energy security. And yeah, we also need to, it cannot just be a technical debate, you know, it's not just a technical issue. As was already mentioned, I think always, even when we are discussing technical questions like Fit for 55, emission trading, energy security, there needs to be a clear connection to the social aspects and the way the system works and how it affects the people and the public. To give an example of why we need or why we think this kind of changing of frame is needed, I think also energy security is being, or there is a risk of it being used as an excuse to push for more fossil infrastructure to get us through this current times, which on one hand is of course understandable. But also, as Mr. Patrick Greichen mentioned, it's supposed to be only for those 2 winters, you know. And here I would maybe take a bit of issue with him in him saying that this is misinterpretation, that we are coming back into the fossil times. I think it is a legitimate concern that this is something that might happen and that we might get locked into more fossil fuel energy than we necessarily need to do. And energy security is one of the, I think, narratives that can be used to argue for this. You know, you can see this in the negotiations when some countries are pushing for relaxing some rules for investments into fossil industry in the European funds and so on. So I think this is something that requires a lot of work also on our side as civil society, and I think this is also where EUKI can be very, very beneficial. And yeah, coming to the social aspects, I think this is something that I would really underscore that this is key, because as already mentioned, if we don't have the public and people on board with the energy transition and don't manage to make it work for them, then I think it's going to be very difficult, and we need to make sure that happens.
Thank you, Stepan. So a whole new connection to people. This is something that we will also come back to many times during this conference. Anelia, to come back to you, when you told us about how much has been changing, can you give us 1 or 2 examples of where you have seen over the years a tangible difference thanks to the EUKI program, and where do you think we can all sort of assess the progress and impact that such a program has been making in these societies of change.
Yeah, glad to speak about that. Indeed, Bankwatch was one of the pioneers in the just transition work and transition in the core regions. And yeah, today just transition probably have a bigger meaning than just core regions. And but indeed, 5 years ago, we were supported by EUKI program to start working with the local leaders, with progressive actors on preparing them for what transition would mean, because obviously this was something which was coming. At that time, there was also still not a just transition fund at all. There was a bit of diffidence about, yes, is coal end coming? I mean, when there was most of the country didn't have any coal phase-out date planned at that time. So we were pioneering that, and I could say that indeed with the support and the trust we had from EUKI community and also partnership with many of you, by the way, it brings results, because we could say that we see that just transition is just our transition process in most of these regions is unstoppable process. I mean, it is ongoing. It will not come back. They do hope, indeed, that this is really a short-term solution for the coal use in the next 18 months. And I could mention examples of Slovakia, where we have worked with local municipalities of Upper Nitra region and creating one of the models about inclusion of the different municipal actors and progressive civil society to work and develop solutions like fourth-generation district heating, which is currently under discussion, and to phase out coal and turn to renewables, something which was completely unfeasible before. Or like Eastern Wielkopolska region, where the political will matched the interest of actors of local level, and we have one of the most progressive coal regions, which promising to be carbon neutral by 2040. I mean, much more strategic and progressive targets than what Polish government had. So we prove that through the local level action and through the work with the mayors and the local actors, you could sometimes show to be more progressive and more active than what governments were saying, it was promising at that time. And just to mention that indeed for making it just and in the long term, what is key is the participation and transparency of these processes, because it is a change for many people. It's a change which they need to understand and accept, and it's a change of power, no doubt. We will be replacing or shifting the companies. Sometime, like in Slovakia, they start to grow, the coal mining companies start to grow tomatoes instead of producing energy. So they will be change of the economical models of these countries, of these regions and these places. But it needs to be happening in the inclusive manner, that women, young people, and local associations from all different type of sectors are brought around the table and discussing on an equal basis with the governments and with the companies about what will be the model they would like to see. It's not everywhere like that, and I think EUKI is really crucial to really help implementation of the progressive framework we have on EU level, at the local level, and exchange experience between different regions, because we are now in the situation that we need to accelerate more of the transition. And no way, we don't have time to lose, so we need to be faster also at learning and exchanging what is working in different places. Obviously, every solution is typical or will be working on specific places, but the exchange helps you to understand common patterns and to see what are the risks forward and to take a precautionary actions.
Well, thank you. As we often say, you cannot email trust, right? And you have to build it in every community, in every municipality, one after the other. Niels, how would you answer this question?
Thanks very much. I think, I mean, just to start, I think climate policy is really deeply political. I mean, it's so much about politics. And having said that, I think EUKI plays an important role in a sense of helping civil society in Central and Eastern Europe to come up to speed. And if I compare it, for example, with, I mean, I just looked it up before I came here, the NABU, which is the German Federation of Nature Conservation, the NABU has almost 900,000 members. It has about 300 staff, professional staff. It has a turnover of almost 80 million euros per year. And maybe I'm overlooking something here, but I mean, I would say there's no NGO, I mean, like that in Central and Eastern Europe. And I think, of course, EUKI cannot match that. I mean, that's obvious, you know, but I think it's very important that there is quite a difference between civil society, its professionalism, its impact, its ability to speak to power in Central and Eastern Europe compared to the West. And I mean, happy to take that point. I mean, but that's my perception. Maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, that's also what I hear from my EUKI partner. And that I think is a really crucial point. If I look, I mean, what is actually happening on the ground, there are like so many issues where NGOs can actually help to increase transparency, to expose what is happening. And give you an example. Maybe you saw that article in the New York Times was last week where an NGO in Central and Eastern Europe combined with journalists from the New York Times exposed how virgin forest in Romania is cut down and turned into wood pellets. I mean, that was really, I mean, a very stark example, but it was very helpful, I think, to create that kind of transparency. And if I look at your work and Bankwatch, I think, you know, I mean, really to expose what is happening on the ground, exposing corruption, for example, is really a key issue. It's, of course, very political, and it's very difficult, I mean, for government funding sometimes, but I think only at first sight, because we are in the EU. And that's different because we're in the EU. I mean, it matters what happens in other member states. It matters whether courts are independent. It matters whether, you know, there's actually a functioning democracy because it impacts all of us. And that's why I think EUKI plays, of course, a very small contribution to this big picture. But to be political, to be bold in a sense, I think that is the role I see for NGOs. And I see that civil society in Central and Eastern Europe has difficulties to match what we have in the West. So the question is actually how we can actually fill this gap. And EUKI, I think, can play a small role there. And it requires somewhat being courageous, I think. But I think that's the way to go because, as I said at the beginning, climate is such a deeply political problem and it requires political solutions.
And it seems to be a unifier towards political and social union when we think this to the very end, Niels. Okay, thank you very much. Stepan, how do you look at this when we zoom out?
I will maybe come back to the social issues because I think that's where you can be very strong. It's bringing together different progressive actors. This is also what we are trying to do in our project, and I think this is very important because this is the role of civil society, really being the bridge among different countries, but also sort of between the public and the government. And I think this is a problem that we are seeing now more and more. Is this? You said unifier, but for me, we are also seeing, I think, more divisions, and this is becoming a problem. Is that on the one hand, I think the debates in I mean, it's a huge generalization, but the debates we see in Western Europe and in the Central and Eastern Europe on climate are very, very different. And for example, the Czech debate is very different from the one in Germany. And this is, I think, where it's very important for civil society to cooperate internationally, because then you are also, if you're only working on the national level, for example, or in Brussels, you sort of lose perspective of what is going on in those countries. So I think it's very important to have this exchange, and this is where EUKI is very useful. On the other hand, also on the national level, I think there is also, depends of course on the government and on the specific country, but there can be also some sort of distance between the government and the public and a bit of misunderstanding. Just recently there was a poll in the Czech Republic published, and the question was whether people would prefer Czech Republic to negotiate bilaterally with Russia to get lower prices of gas, or whether they would prefer to you know, keep on with the current policy, even if it means higher prices of energy and need to save energy and so on. And it was quite close, but the majority was for the first option. So this is something where I think there is a divide between and a growing kind of challenge and a problem that definitely the civil society can help to tackle. And I think it's very important that we do that and that we come up with ways together how to really address this issue and how to really make clear, and also agree with politicians and the governments that this is that the transition, the energy transition, is the way out of this, and that also more public participation is needed in all those processes. So this is something that I think through those wide partnerships of organizations and movements and being closer to people and also aligning maybe with social organizations and actors like that, this is something that we'll be trying to do as well.
So let's stick with this for a moment, Stepan, and let's stick with you. Is this now an example where you would say we can show and prove a particularly positive cooperation between civil society and governments in this very, very tangible and pressing question now? And if not this one, where in the EUKI, sort of under the EUKI roof, have you seen a particularly positive cooperation of these two sides?
Well, we are working on that now. We have some very constructive, I think, discussions with the Czech government. So we are trying to push for that. But I think maybe one side that I forgot to mention is also cooperating with businesses. This is something that we started off in the last year or so, and because usually what we were lacking is the voice of really progressive business pushing for sustainable transition. You know, usually the usual suspects from the business were against the transition or trying to sort of slow it down. And what seems to be quite successful, and it's starting off and it's having already some concrete results, is we managed to have cooperation with this network of sustainable businesses that established themselves in the last few months, and now we are helping them with advocacy and how to approach politicians and decision makers to make their message that we support sustainable transition and we support energy transition and so on. And this is something that is also important for us as businesses. So